Coming up, Roosevelt and Washington put up impressive performances last week, setting the stage for what should be a thrilling regular season finale. We'll preview the 1-2 matchup with help from Argus Leader Media's Dave Nicholson.
Part of the postseason picture has already been painted in North Dakota. We'll take a look at some of this week's big playoff matchups.
All that, plus a look at our game plan for Varsity Sports Live and another round of Pigskin Pick'em. Varsity Sports starts right now. And how is everybody doing? Alongside Jason Andera, I am Jay Elson. Well, the regular season wrapping up, as we mentioned earlier, North Dakota, some of the 9-man schools already got underway in the postseason last week, but for everybody else, they're playing to get into the playoffs or they're playing for a seed within those playoffs.
Talking about AAA in North Dakota especially, teams are playing for their football lives this week. And in South Dakota, a few more teams make the playoffs, but they're definitely jockeying for home field advantage on their way to the Dome.
Yeah, before we get into what's coming up this week in high school football in North and South Dakota, let's take a look back at the week that was. We start with our South Dakota rewind. Sioux Falls, Washington delivered another dominant defensive performance, pitching its second consecutive shutout in a 42-0 rout of Rapid City Stevens. The Warriors now yielded a combined 14 points in their last 4 games. Jack Skellhouse paced the offense with the 3 total touchdowns, while Chayton Fitzsimmons added 2 more scores on the ground. And with that win, Washington moves up to number 1 in the power points, but the Warriors have to beat Roosevelt Thursday to secure that top spot.
Speaking of those Rough Riders, they actually trailed Rapid City Central 14-13 early on, but that deficit didn't last long. Roosevelt turned up the heat on both sides of the ball. The Riders, they actually allowed just 1 rushing yard in the first half, and quarterback Jet Thune passed for 6 touchdowns, ran another one in as Roosevelt gets the commanding 68-26 win.
O'Gorman had no trouble with Huron, blanking the Tigers 51-0 at McEnany Field, but the offensive numbers weren't as gaudy as you might have expected. Luke Fritz threw just 2 passes for 71 yards in the ground game, combined for 175 yards with no single player rushing for more than 43. Antonio Casiello paced the Knights' attack, finding the end zone 3 times in that win.
Well, Lincoln has finally put back-to-back victories together. That's the first time they've done that since their 2-0 start. They snapped Brandon Valley's 4-game win streak with a 24-19 win at Howard Wood Field. The Patriots got 2 touchdowns and 80 yards on the ground from junior Corey Fichter.
I mean, I should have cut it back, but I didn't, so I just kind of went to the outside and went for it because I knew Tyler was going to get for it for me, so that's what I did.
Class 11 AA squared off for the ESD title and a likely top seed in the playoffs at Hollister Field in Pierre, and it was the Governors cooling off the red-hot Colonels. Seth Neal scored twice. Brevin Kaiser tossed a touchdown to Derek Schreiner as Pierre brings an end to Mitchell's 5-game winning streak, 29-21 the final.
Mitchell, they're 5-game win streak, so it's pretty good to beat them and pretty good to get the ESC championship.
Brookings struck first with a pair of Gerald Maxwell touchdowns, but for the second week in a row, Harrisburg climbed back in the game. Just like last week, the Tigers forced overtime by tying the game at 14. And just like last week, they blocked an extra point in that extra session. The Tigers tied things up on a Jacob Clemmy touchdown, and then they made their PAT to escape with a 21-20 victory. The win gives Harrisburg their 3rd win in a row, and they'll look to extend that streak to 4 in their game against Yankton next week.
I asked these guys, they're backed into a corner, and I said, you know, their character is revealed in times of adversity, not in times of blowouts and those things, and we're proud of what our guys did in the second half.
Preston Arity aired it out for St. Thomas More. He passed for 6 touchdowns to help the Cavaliers cap an undefeated regular season with a 45-14 win over Belle Fourche. Bryson Westland rushed for over 100 yards in the first half for the Bronx, but STM able to reel him in the rest of the way.
Well, the highly anticipated battle for the 281 Conference and the 9AA Region 3 title was held in Woonsocket last Friday night. Both teams fought hard, but it was Woonsocket Wessington Springs Sanborn Central who controlled the clock and held Wolseley Wessington in check. The Blackhawks claimed a 20-6 decision despite being outgained by the Warbirds 255 yards to 203 yards.
We just had to fight it out to the end, and we were able to make some big plays and just get it done and just fight through everything. And, you know, I think it came down to who made the fewest mistakes. And we made some mistakes, but I think we made just a couple fewer than they did.
All right, it's game ball time, Jason. We had 2 quarterbacks in the state of South Dakota that tossed for 6 touchdowns last week. They were Roosevelt's Jet Thune and St. Thomas More's Preston Arity, but you liked Arity's performance a little bit better. Why is that?
Arity was on point throughout this game, threw for over 300 yards just in the first half of this game, and second half they reeled it in a little bit and just ran the ball, but what a day for Preston Arity, the junior. And Jet Thune had those big numbers as well, but maybe not quite as accurate on the day.
Gotcha. All right, let's take a look at some of the other guys that were considered for this varsity game ball this week. One guy I think that deserves to be pointed out is a recent game ball recipient himself, Josh Brown from Del Rapids St. Mary, 258 yards, 3 touchdowns, but for his career now, over 5,000 yards. Impressive.
It takes a lot of good games to put up 5,000 career yards, and that's what Josh Brown does. Consistency every week, puts up a huge game.
Absolutely. All right, well, Dalton Feedy was dealing again on Friday, and it helped Bismarck Century do something it hadn't done since 2010. We'll look at that and the rest of the week that was in North Dakota next.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
The Bismarck High-Bismarck Century rivalry has been all demons since 2010, Jason, but that was not the case on Friday, and that's where we start this week's North Dakota Rewind. The teams were scoreless after 1, but the Patriots threw the ball all over the yard after that. Dalton Feedy continued his stellar play, completing 23 of 35 passes for 387 yards.
He's on point.
And 2 touchdowns. He sure was. Feedy also ran for 2 scores to lead Century to a convincing 30-14 win. Adam Geiger was Feedy's favorite target once again. He held in 10 catches for 219 yards and a score. Century now needs a win against Williston to secure a playoff spot, while Bismarck has to beat Mandan to punch their ticket to the postseason.
You know, the mindset wasn't any pressure. I think the team handled it very well, and we came out, we just said we're going to play our game, and we thought our game would handle it, and it did tonight.
Dickinson served a large dose of Tyrell Harris, and it paid off against Legacy. The junior running back rolled up 248 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground to power the Midgets to a 48-26 win over the Sabres. With that win, Dickinson clinched a spot in the playoff, and they have a chance to win the WDA if they can beat Minot next week.
Don't let the scoreboard fool you, folks. The battle between Davies and South was much closer than the 35-8 final. Game hinged on a big goal line stand for the Eagles as they stuffed Gus Sy away on 4th and goal to keep the Bruins from tying it up, and instead, the Eagles reeled off 21 straight points to close out the game and the win. Tanner Boyanovsky, Ty Jokum each ran for 2 touchdowns for Davies, who even their overall record at 4-4, they can earn the 2 seed in the East, Jason, with a win and a Cheyenne loss.
I think it's getting interesting. Well, both Red River and North needed a win on Friday to have any chance at playing playoff football, and after a relatively quiet start, the Rough Riders exploded for 28 second-half points on their way to a 35-14 win. Derek Murph completed 11 of 16 for 156 yards and 3 touchdowns to lead the Riders.
In the battle of Class AA's top teams, the Highliners rose to the occasion. Valley City used a big night from Nate Rodriguez, who fouled the end zone twice to take down previously unbeaten Beulah 24-21. Rodriguez ran for 137 yards on the night, while his counterpart, Mikey Morris, went for 132 yards for the Miners.
And I give our guys a lot of credit because those backs, of course, get all the pictures in their papers and the touchdowns, but we slap them on the butt as much as we can because we know they're important to us.
Shanley needed a win against Central Cass on Friday to secure the top spot in the East, and the Deacons defense played well enough to make that happen. Shanley beat the Squirrels 20-6 behind 213 ground yards from Matt Bird. And Tom Erie had 2 interceptions in that big win.
Deacons get a big one. Well, as we mentioned earlier, Jason, Dalton Feedy turned in another huge performance in Century's win over Bismarck High, but it's the guy he threw it to that gets our varsity game ball for this week.
Yeah, not often you can be targeted as an offensive player. You need to shut down this one guy, and you still come up with 10 catches, 219 yards, and a touchdown. Adam Geiger did just that with a very tough defense in his way. Those are impressive numbers.
Dalton Feedy among the other guys that were considered this week. Brady Workin from Lemoore LM. 307 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, a lot of these small-town backs had huge weeks. Briar Parisian had a big week working, as you said, and a lot of these guys getting it done now that the games count for a little bit more.
Absolutely. Coming up, we'll show you our game plan for this week's edition of Varsity Sports Live. But first, playoff implications will weigh heavy on the final week of the regular season in North Dakota. We'll take a look at some of those scenarios when we come back.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
It's going to be pretty tough. If we start off slow, then Minot thinks they can hang with us, and then that destroys our spark, and they can have a chance of leading the game.
All right, that is Dickinson running back Tyrell Harris talking about his team's big regular season finale against Minot. Jason, that's just one of the big games going on in AAA tonight. The playoff scenarios there really hang in the balance. What are the importance of some of these games?
Well, obviously, if you win, you're in. That makes a game of utmost importance, and that's what's happening right now as Bismarck is taking on Mandan tonight. The winner is in, the loser is out. Century also has to beat Williston tonight. A little bit more likely for them, not quite as tough of a game, so they're probably in. So 2 huge games tonight, and then of course we talked about Minot and Dickinson. The winner of that game wins the West.
How strange is that, though, to even be addressing the fact that both Bismarck teams have to win to get into the playoffs?
We were talking about the Demons last week as the #1 team in the state, and all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, they might miss the playoffs.
That's great. Well, how about the EDC, Jason? How does that look like that's going to shake out?
Well, right now you've got Davies, South, and Cheyenne all sitting there looking like they have a chance to make the playoffs with 4-2 marks in the East. But if one of those teams slip up, Cheyenne is the only team that can slip up and get totally knocked out of the playoffs, and that's because they lost head-to-head with Grand Forks Red River. So Red River gets that win on Saturday, and if they lose, that'll be the only way to change that top 4. But obviously, all those other teams playing for seeding. West Fargo, the only one that doesn't really have to sweat right now.
All right, let's move to Class A, where the playoffs are set for Saturday. Some good games in this first round.
Good games. You've got some teams that are on a roll, and we're talking about teams like Harvey-Wells County. They've got that 4-4 record, but they're playing very well. Velva Sawyer and Hazen, 2 teams that are not on a roll right now, kind of coming down from the mountaintop, but one of those teams will advance to the next round, and these teams are all waiting for those top 4 seeds next week who are on a bye.
Finally, let's move to 9-man, where they are already 1 round into the postseason. 8 teams had first-round byes, though, Jason. They're set to begin their playoff runs on Saturday.
Oh, boy, this is where it gets really fun because you've got the cross-regional play, which we haven't had a lot of, so you get to see which regions are actually better than the others, but you see the slate there. A ton of great games on Saturday.
All right, the top seed for the 11 AAA playoffs are going to be up for grabs in Sioux Falls on Thursday. Argus Leader Media's Dave Nicholson will stop by to help us preview the big Roosevelt-Washington showdown right after this.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
You're watching Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network.
Thanks, ladies, for bringing us back from break.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, it's the final week of the regular season, Jason, as you know, here in South Dakota. That means all remaining games going to be played on Thursday night this week. And despite that, though, the schedule does not change for Varsity Sports Live. Jason and Tom Neiman will have all your highlights, post-game reactions this week, but they'll also give you a special playoff preview. Again, that's coming up 10:30 Friday night here on Midco Sports Network. And here are the games that we're going to be covering in South Dakota on Thursday night. Jason, a good list, a couple of really fun ones, potentially.
A couple big tests this week. Sioux Falls Christian has had a few games where they haven't really been challenged. Big one coming this Thursday night, where they take on the Mustangs, who are visiting Sioux Falls. And I'm kind of looking forward to Sioux Falls, Lincoln, O'Gorman. These 2 teams, too. You haven't seen O'Gorman play a tough game in a few weeks, and Lincoln on their first 2-game winning streak since they went 2-0 earlier this year.
Well, and which Lincoln team are we going to see? Are we going to see the team against Brandon Valley, or are we going to see the team against those 11 AA teams?
I think they're getting better as they get through this season, so I think they give O'Gorman a pretty good game.
Well, the most anticipated game of the week is, without question, the 1-2 matchup between Washington and Roosevelt in Class 11 AAA. And here to help us preview that one is Argus Leader Media high school reporter Dave Nicholson. And Dave, Always fun to see a meaningful matchup in the final weekend of the regular season. Obviously, both the teams want to win this football game, both for playoff seeding and, of course, bragging rights. But do you get a sense that one of them wants it a little bit more?
Well, I don't know. I'd be hard-pressed to say that either team wants it more than the other. These are, the two best teams in the state, the two most consistent teams in the state for the majority of the season. Obviously, that number one seed is up for grabs. But this one's been kind of on the calendar for a while now as kind of the presumptive potential championship matchup here in the final game of the regular season. I think the Rough Riders are banged up. They haven't been at their best the past 2 weeks, while Washington is really a surging team right now. But the matchups between those two are going to be very interesting.
All right, let's talk about on the field now. The highly efficient Roosevelt offense going against that stout Washington defense. When these two units are on the field, who do you think has the upper hand?
Well, it's hard to say. At full strength, probably Roosevelt. Some of their injuries have been more sustained along the defensive side. But, Washington's been as stout as anyone, and they have a lot of playmakers at every level. Their head coach, Chad Statham, one of the things that he likes about this team is that they're not reliant on one or two players on the defensive side. They're getting some big game-changing plays at every level, and so they've got some guys that can get after the passer. They've got some linebackers who floated the ball really well and some playmakers in the secondary. At the same time, Roosevelt's quarterback, Jet Thune, although he's been a little shaky the past 2 weeks, which is hard to say for a guy who threw 6 touchdown passes last week, but he's as poised and in control at the line of scrimmage as any quarterback, and maybe across classes, and he has a lot of responsibility at the line. And he's typically a very good decision maker and a poised player. But this Washington defense will be the best defense, I think, that he'll face all season.
How about the other side of the ball now, Dave? The Riders trying to fill some holes on defense, but they have been very good this year when they've been healthy. Can Skelhaus and company make big plays against them?
Well, I think that's going to be the key. Washington, what's held that team back the past few seasons, maybe the talent hasn't been there, but a lack of big plays. And going into the season, I think that was a strong sense for a team that is built so well from the offensive line and has a strong defense. Can they score points? And they've been explosive. They're a team that still runs the ball most of the time. They run the ball about 2/3 of the time. Quarterback Jack Skelhaus has a lot of responsibility. Like Jet Thune, he's able to make checks at the line and kind of go off of what he sees. And the head coach, Chad Statham, has a lot of confidence in him. And so it's going to be all about that offensive line in this one and whether Skelhaus can be efficient like he has been all season, making some big plays, big chunk plays. All
right, Dave, you've watched these teams a lot this season. What is your best guess on how this game plays out?
Well, a month ago I wouldn't have hesitated maybe. I would have said I think Roosevelt's the stronger team, but it's hard to look past what Washington has done over that stretch. Neither team has faced a real strong opponent here recently outside of Roosevelt's loss to Brandon Valley almost 2 weeks ago now. But I think we're going to see a close one, and if I had to make a pick, Washington's playing too well right now. But Roosevelt's absolutely a team that I would see capable of winning a state championship. Both these two teams are. I think we're pretty blessed to have this for a regular season finale of the top two teams in the state.
I would definitely agree with that. Again, Dave Nicholson from Argus Leader Media. Thanks, Dave, for joining us today. Dave has picked his Roosevelt Washington winner. Do Jandy and I agree or disagree? We're going to find out next.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
Well, it's getting down to crunch time for our Pigskin Pick'em contest. Rough week for me last week, but my upset
it happens.
Did
You're
keep
on a
me
roll.
in it.
You are on a roll with those upsets. If you are out there watching him pick an upset game, if you're on the other team, you better watch out.
You better be really bummed out.
Watch out.
Jandy brings a 1-point lead into this final week of the regular season. Remember, each correct pick worth 1. Upset picks are worth 2. And here we go. 11AA, Jason Yankton at Harrisburg.
Two teams that are playing pretty well record-wise, but both have some flaws in their game. I think Yankton, the way they're playing, they've gotten a little healthier over the last couple of weeks without some competitive games. I think they win one on the road.
The Bucks look like they've started to figure a couple of things out offensively after back-to-back shutout losses. Harrisburg a little underwhelming the last couple of weeks. I think the Bucks win their 3rd straight. We agree there. Sioux Falls, Washington at Roosevelt. Everybody's excited about this one.
Good luck guessing what's going to happen on this game. Roosevelt, so efficient on offense, have really converted on almost every drive for a month straight. But can they do that against that tough Washington defense? And then on the other hand, you've got that offensive line for Washington. I mean, that's underrated part of this game. That line could dominate, but defensively, Roosevelt really gets it done up front too. In the end, it's going to be close. I think Washington pulls it out.
I said a few weeks ago that if Washington and Roosevelt played then, I would pick the Warriors. I'm standing by that. It might be a different story if Roosevelt was completely healthy, but they're not. I like Washington in this game as well. Class 2A in North Dakota, St. Mary's at Valley City.
Well, after watching Valley City last week, what they did to Beulah, that was a home game, and they're at home again this week. I think there's a little home field advantage going on here, and St. Mary's won't be able to contend up front with what Valley City brings.
Yeah, Valley City, big physical team. Saw them in person for the first time last week and came away impressed. They've definitely got that championship look about them, and I like the Highliners to finish 8-1. Finally, Cavalier at Richland. This is an interesting one from the 9-man.
Both these two teams have given up just 98 points on the season. Very good defenses, and I think defense is going to win this game. And I think it's Richland's defense. They haven't called on their defense much to win, but I think their defense shuts down Austin Erlob and that attack that Cavalier brings.
We're going to agree on all 4 picks this week. Okay. Not the same Cavalier team that we've seen the past couple of years. Richland, ton of playmakers. Outside of the one tight game that they played against Hankinson, their closest margin of victory has been 36 points. Give me the Colts in this one. Finally, upset picks. This could be the difference.
Yeah, and I think Richardson, Taylor, Hebron pulled up a big upset last week against TGU. I think they get it done again this week over MLS, who only has 1 loss on the year, but their 1 loss to TGU. I think that common opponent gives the favor to Denver Colgrove, a guy who's gained 200-plus yards in 6 straight games. The Raiders get it done.
I actually agree that is going to be an upset, but for the sake of competition, I'm not going to pick it. Not going to pick it. Harvey Wells County over Northern Cass. That is my upset pick for the week. All right, that's going to do it for us for this week. For Jason Andera, I'm Jay Elson. Remember to bring it back here Friday night, 10:30 for Varsity Sports Live.